Hey there, everybody. This week is class 12, and what I decided to cover today is we're going to go Pyro to game engines. So this is mostly sprite sheet development. So I think we've got, boy, I'm looking at the calendar here, we have um, 2 more days that we meet. We have the 27th and the 4th of May. And actually, the 4th of May, that is finals week. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to make the 4th like a working day. We'll meet at our normal time that day for any questions, and then you'll have until, I would say the 8th, which is Saturday, May 8th, to finish your final project. And our final project is going to be a combination of our rigid body and pyro. Now, I'm showing you all these different methods for bringing things into game engines, but for your final project, you're not going to have to bring stuff into the game engines. What I'll be looking for is either just a flip book with your rigid body with pyro. So, you can use pyro for an explosion with your rigid, or maybe it generates dust as your rigid body starts to blow apart or whatever it is. So you can either do a flip book or a mantra render. I'm giving the option there between the two because your mantra render could take a long time. And if it takes too long, and by too long, I mean more than like 5 to 8 hours, you can't, a mantra render is not going to be quick. In our industry, 24 to 48 hours to render a sequence is acceptable. I don't expect you to tie your computer up for 2 days, but so when I say, if you can do a mantra render of your final project, your pyro and your rigid bodies combined, and it's only a couple hours, then you're in good shape. But if it's going to take a lot longer than that, then just a flip book out of the viewport would be fine too. And we can talk more about that next week. So what I'm going to cover today is working with sprite sheets. Now I am going to show you how we can create a sprite sheet using Pyro to create a customized explosion that we can then use to apply to a particle system in Unreal Engine. Now, again, this is Unreal Engine. You could use your sprite sheet and apply it to a particle system in Unity as well, but I'm going to do Unreal Engine here, and I'm going to use the Niagara visual effects system. So I'm going to show you how we can design the sprite sheet in Houdini, which will actually be a combination of rendering out the pyro sequence. That will have to be rendered with mantra, but we can render small because it's a sprite sheet. So each frame is only going to be like 256 by 256. So it goes a little bit faster as opposed to rendering out a full-size animation at 1920 by 1080, for instance, at HD quality. So we do need to render out the sequence. Then we bring the sequence back into Houdini's compositing network, which is called the IMG network. So Houdini has a compositor built right in. It's like an image editing program. So we then bring that sequence back into the image network, and we could render out what's called a mosaic. And that creates the sprite sheet automatically for us. Then we can take our sprite sheet into our game engine and build our in this case, an explosion or smoke simulation with it. So I'm going to show how we design the sprite sheets in Houdini and then how to bring them into Unreal and connect them into the Niagara system. And that'll be the bulk of what I have here for today. Now, I've added 2 additional references here. Today, I'm kind of stuffing all of the game engine stuff into our heads. So item 3 here, this is not one of my videos. I found this one. Item 3 here uses a sprite sheet. So this would be what I'm going to show you here, where we design a sprite sheet using the mosaic node. So you have your sprite sheet. Now I'm going to show you how we put it into a particle system, but you can also use a sprite sheet to create just an animated material. It doesn't have to go into a particle network. Or a particle system, I should say. So I found a really good video here showing you how to do that. It's basically using what's called the flipbook node in Unreal Engine's material editor. Now, again, I'm sure Unity does this as well, but you'd have to look that up on your own. So This video does not use Houdini though. This video starts out, about the first half of it is designing the sprite sheet, I think in like Photoshop. So you can kind of disregard the first part and just move right to where they take the sprite sheet into Unreal Engine. And your sprite sheet you'll be generating in Houdini. Or you don't have to. I mean, this is just a nice technique across the board. But this shows you how to set up the material using the flipbook node in order to make your sprite sheet an animated material, as opposed to the methodology I'm showing you here, which is using it in a particle system. All right, so I thought I'd throw that one in as some ancillary information. And then I also have a video that I just made yesterday. Those of you that were in my visual effects class yesterday, I talked a little bit about this. Now I have a detailed video for it. This is demonstrating how to get Houdini particles into Unreal Engine's Niagara system. So basically you can, now we're not working with particles this semester in Houdini, but Houdini has a really powerful particle system, or a particle simulator. And you'll see a little bit of it if you watch my video here. So actually what I did in this video is I took a pyro simulation, and I used the velocity from the pyro simulation to drive the movement of a Houdini particle system. Then I go through the process of getting the Houdini particles out of Houdini and into the Niagara particle system in Unreal Engine, and it drives the Niagara particles. It's really pretty amazing. So I thought I'd throw that one in there also. And what I'm covering today should really get us through a lot of the process of how you get basically deconstructing your visual effect in Houdini and then putting it back together in a game engine. And again, I'm using Unreal Engine, but there will be similar methodologies for things like Unity. All right, and then our assignment, we're going to do another production assignment here. This is a 5-pointer. It's a pretty simple one. All I want you to do is design a custom pyro simulation. And by custom, I mean just experiment. Experiment with the shader that we talked about last week, maybe change its color, change the behavior of the simulation. Hopefully you've been experimenting with all the different parameters and attributes we have with a pyro sim. You don't want to just press the shelf tool and then render it. Customize it in some way, motion-wise and look-wise. And then I want you just to render it out. Basically use a technique I'm going to show you here in a few minutes. Render out the sequence with Mantra, then reconstruct a sprite sheet using the mosaic node. And then I just want you to submit the sprite sheet and save it as a JPEG. I think you can save it as JPEG. If you can't, you can save it as a PNG or something else. But JPEG for this purpose will be nice and small. I just want the sprite sheet. So you don't have to put it into Unreal and try to animate it or anything. I just want to see your sprite sheet. So you're basically just going to be submitting a JPEG or a PNG. I need to submit it here. This is due before class next week. It'll be class 12. It's called Sprite Sheet. So I just want you to be familiar with the process of designing a sprite sheet. So a pretty simple assignment, actually. All right, so let's jump over to Houdini, and I'll walk us through this. So I'm going to move this aside. And here in Houdini, I have this is just a basic pyro sim. This is a sphere. And then I applied, from the pyro shelf, I applied the fireball, I think it was, the fireball there. All right, so once I get my simulation the way I want it, I now need to set it up for creating a sprite sheet. Now, what I want to do here is I want to use this explosion. I want to see it form from nothing into the explosion. Then it transitions into smoke, and then it disappears. And then that'll give me a nice sprite sheet to be able to build or reconstruct a pyro system in Unreal Engine. So typically what we do here is, this angle is not going to work, something like this, because it's moving upward. What I want to do is I want to see it as like an explosion pointing directly at me. So what we could do is we want to go to the top viewport. So if I look at it from the top view, I get a nice explosion. You know, it kind of works in all directions. So what I'm going to do here is then I can just add a camera, because in order to render a mantra, we have to have a camera. Now I already have a camera in the scene. So if you don't have one, you can do new camera. I'm going to do camera 1. That's my camera there. And we see I have the explosion. And what I'm doing is I want to just frame the camera here to make sure that the explosion fits in frame and I'm not cutting any of it off. Oh, the other thing you want to do is you need to change your render resolution on the camera. So with your camera selected here, I can go into the View tab, and I'm going to change my resolution to 256 by 256. Now that's pretty small, but you want to think about what's going to happen here. I'm going to have a whole series of these. Each frame is going to become a sprite, and then this sprite is going to be on a bunch of particles. Each particle in Unreal Engine will cycle through all of these images. So I don't need them to be overly high resolution. So I'm making them 256 by 256. We do that here. And of course, if you want, you can adjust the look. If you go into the Pyro shader itself, which would be, that will be in our matte network. There's my Fireball shader, so I can edit it here. I might even want to add a light, which I did not do, but a light will give you better shading also on the simulation. And now what I want to do, and when you're working on, we call that, the look development phase, where you're working on lighting and shading. What you want to do is move over to the render view. Well, actually, before we move to the render view, we also want to create a mantra node. Now, if you don't create one and you go to the render view and hit the render button, it will automatically generate a mantra node, but we want to get used to making our own mantra node. And that is in the out network. This is our render network, means output. So in the out network, I just want to add my own mantra render node. And I can do that by right-clicking in here, going to render, and choosing mantra. So I'm just going to drop that in there and leave it at its defaults for right now. So now I can go to the render view and hit the render button. And then it will render whatever frame I'm on here to give me an idea of what this looks like. So we see it's square, it's 256 by 256, and it renders fairly quickly because its resolution is small. So I can just kind of see how it's looking through all phases of its life here. And that looks pretty good. So once I'm done with that, I'm now ready to render out the sequence. So in the out network, for my mantra node, there's a few things I want to change in the render settings here. So first of all, we want to figure out how many frames to render. Now, ideally, because this is a sprite sheet, we want it to be square, meaning 5 across and 5 down for a total of 25 sprites, or 8 across and 8 down for a total of 64. We want to keep it in multiples of 2. So it's going to take a little bit of timing. So here I did adjust this so that when I hit frame 100, it pretty much has dissipated. And that's good, because then that means I can do a 10 by 10 sprite sheet for a total of 100 sprites. Remember, it's going to be a sprite for every frame. Now, if you can't quite get it to fit just right, what you could do is you could retime it. If we go back to the object network here, to the my scene view, I could go into my Pyro import right here. There's the incoming Pyro, and I could add a retime node. So if I just type in retime, and then I connect that in, what I can tell it here is it says it has the input frame range. So maybe my image loops from 1 to 150. And I can say I want to retime it to 1 to 100. So then it will scrunch it in there. So that's how you can get your proper multiples if you need to with the retiming node. All right, so let me go back to my out network here. Where am I? Out network. There we go. So some other things we need to do here. So you can see I'm doing 1 to 100. So that'll allow me to do 10 by 10 in the mosaic node once this is rendered. I'm rendering from this camera. And really the only other thing you'll have to do in here is make sure you set up your render path properly. So right now it's looking to where my Houdini file is. It's going to go into a subfolder that I put in there called render. And then it's going to give it a name, which I called it explosion. Now here's the important part. You have to put a dot, $F2. This attaches the frame number to each image. So it'll be explosion 1, explosion 2, explosion 3, 4, and so on. If you do not put this in here, if that is not in there, it will just continue to rewrite over the same image and you will have one image. It will render 100 times, but it will render one image. So you need the dot, $F, but then I usually put a 2 on it. That's frame padding. So that means it'll be 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. If I just do $F, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4. $2, $F2 would be .01, .02, and I could even go further. If I do 4, it would be .0001, .0002. So we like to use that because it keeps the systems from getting confused. So you have to put the $F2, that's a capital F also, and then you need to put your extension in. So I put .png. Now for sprite sheets, you want to use something that carries alpha information like a PNG, a TIFF, or an EXR. Those are the 3 formats we want to use. And then we should be ready to go. Then you just hit the render to disk. And it could take a while because it's going to render 100 images. On my system here, which is pretty beefy, I think this took maybe 20 minutes to render, something like that. And when it's done, what it gave me was, let me show you here. So here's my project folder right here. So there's my Houdini file. There's the render folder. And in the render folder, you see I have a bunch of PNGs, explosion.01 PNG, 02, 03, 04, and it goes all the way through the explosion. Now I can recombine them into a sprite sheet. Now there are other applications out there that can do this, but Houdini can do it itself. So we do this in what's called the IMG network, image network. This is our compositing network. So if I come into here, it'll drop you right into the comp. It usually isn't right up here. You need an image network. If it does bring you to this level, what you'd have to do is just put in a new image network node. That's what this is. But it should create this by default. And then once you go in there, you have all of your nodes available to you. There's all kinds, this is like After Effects or Nuke, all of it combined together. This is basically an image editing application now. So what we need to do is bring them back in using a file node. So I'd right click in here and do import file. And then I would just click this little button here, allows me to browse for the file right there. That brings in the file. So then we have the file here. If I go to the compositing node, I can see it here. It shows me. It's basically reading those PNGs. Then what I can do is put down a mosaic node. So I would right click in here. I'm not sure where this resides, so I'll just type in MOS for mosaic, and right there it is, mosaic. And I connect those in. And then in the mosaic node, this is where I have to set it up. How many images am I going to have? Well, I know I have 100. And I want to, I want to do my horizontal and vertical. So I want it to be 10 across by 10 down. And then if I put my display flag here, it should show me the images. What is going on there? Yeah, I should see them in here. Now I am having a little bit of trouble with this. For some reason, it wasn't reading some of my images, but I should see them here. They should show up now, right here. So again, I'm having a little bit of an error issue, and I don't know what was going on with it. But what it did give me, again, if I go, let's see where is this. I have this in Sprite sheet. So here's the Sprite sheet right here. Let me bring it down the size so you can see it. There it is. That's what I should see in there. But again, for some reason, it was giving me trouble with the, I don't know what I did. I've got all kinds of errors down here in my Houdini console. So I'm not sure what's happening, but that's the process. It should be that simple. The first time I did it, it worked, but now when I reloaded this file, it gave me errors. So here's my Sprite sheet. And so this is what you would submit for class next week. Just submit the Sprite sheet. So there they are, all lined up. So 10 across by 10 down for a total of 100, representing the 100 frames that's in my PyroSim. So now I can take that into Unreal Engine and start to put it back together. So in Unreal Engine here, what I have is I imported the Sprite sheet. Let's just move this up. There's my Sprite sheet right there. I just simply dragged and dropped it into the content browser in Unreal Engine. And then I need to make a material for it. So I would right click in here and do, this is being cut off, but I would do a new material. And I've already made that material, so I'm just going to walk you through that. Right here is my material. Oops, that is too large. There we go. All right, so you'll have your material node, and in the material node, since this is going to be a particle system and it's going to be an explosion, we typically set its blend mode to additive right here. So that's the first thing we do. Then what I'm going to do is I need to create what's called the particle sub UV node. This will read a Sprite sheet. So we can get that by just right clicking in here and typing in particle sub. And there it is, particle sub UV. And then I just need to place my Sprite sheet into the particle sub UV's texture parameter right here. You could just drag it from the content browser and drop it there, or you can find it in your drop-down list here. All right, so that's all we need to do in there. Now, if you want to be able to control color on this particle, now this particle, since the Sprite sheet already has its own color, I don't necessarily need to do this. I could just technically go like this and wire it right into the base color. But if you want to have some control over maybe altering the color slightly on each of these sprites, you can hook in what's called a particle color node. Again, we can just right click and type in particle, and right there it is, particle color. And then what I do is I multiply the sub UV, the Sprite sheet, by the particle color, and then wire that into the base color. This is just a multiply node. And what this does, the particle color basically is a placeholder. It's a bridge. This gives me access to altering the particle's color in my particle system. In this case, we're using Niagara. And the other thing we want to do is we want to be able to control the opacity in the particle system. So I also placed another particle color node into the opacity. Now here I'm wiring in the alpha. So this is RGBA, or this is RGB, this is R, G, and B, and then this is alpha. So up here, because it's dealing with color, my particle color is using the RGB output. But here, because I want to deal with transparency, I'm wiring in the alpha. And that will now allow me to control the alpha, or the transparency, in the particle system. So that's the basic setup here for our particles material using a Sprite sheet. All right, so let me close out of that. And then I'm ready to set up the particle system. So I'm using Niagara. That's the newer system in Unreal Engine. And we can get that. This is being cut off, but down here I can go to the effects category and choose Niagara system. And what I did is I actually just made an empty system. I started from scratch. And now I've already built one, so I'm just going to walk us through this. So here it is. Oh, that's interesting. Where Houdini accent? What? That's not the one that I built. Oh, here it is, Pyro. It's this one. So there's my sprites. So I get this really nice sort of fireballish feel here. So let me show you how I set that up. Now I started with what's called a fountain. Now for those of you that aren't in my visual effects class where we're learning Niagara, this is going to be probably a little daunting. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. But just to step us through this a little bit. So what I did is there's a whole bunch of preset emitters here. If I right click, I can do add emitter. And the one I used was the fountain emitter. And then I made some modifications in here. So I got rid of the gravity, the acceleration force. I believe it also comes with location through in a cone. I took that out. Basically just to get the particles to just sort of emanate outwards in all directions. Now, the specific aspects that you need to set up in here in order to use your sprite sheet are this. So the first thing we need to do is I need to create a module called a sub image index, which used to be accessible from right here. Under particle update, I could hit this plus and it would be in here, but it's not now. I actually have to get it from over here in the parameters panel. So if I go to particle attributes and scroll all the way down to the bottom, I can find it in here. Particle sub, where is it? Particle sub, oh, it's being cut off, but down here it says particles sub image index. So I can create that and it adds it here. And then I would drag this module into the particle update category right there. That's how I get that. So if I look at it, what I need to do in here is it gives me a float from a curve. Does it give me? Oh no, I have to add the float from curve. Actually, let me do it this way. Let me just grab, can I grab a new one and drop it in there? Yeah, okay, so this is what it comes in by default. It just has a single number. So what I need to do is I need to add what's called a float from curve. And that allows me to animate through each of the images. So I have 100 images here. So from this little drop box, I do dynamic input, and then I'm going to choose float from curve. And that gives me the curve. And that's what I have up here. So let me get rid of this one so it's out of the way. So there's my float from curve. So what I'm doing here is I'm telling it the first value to be 0. So it's starting with the first image, the first sprite. Then the last one here needs to be the total number of sprites that I have. And I don't have 36, I have 100. There we go. I thought it looked a little odd. See, now it's playing through, each particle is playing through all 100 sprites. So basically it's animating. It's saying start at, each particle starts at sprite 0 and goes all the way through sprite 100. Now there's one other thing we need to do in here. Down here under the sprite renderer, we need to make sure that we set our sub UVs to be our appropriate rows and columns. So you see right here, remember I have 10 across and 10 down, so I have 10 and 10. So I have to change these also. So up here, we're cycling from 0 to 100, all 100 sprites. And in the sprite renderer, I'm telling it, I have to tell it, hey, your sub UVs have 10 rows across and 10 columns down. And then we should get a nice animation here, using all the sprites, and I get this really cool looking sort of fireball effect. Nice and smooth. Looks almost better than it did in Houdini. So that's how we set up, how we use a sprite sheet to build particle systems. I think that's everything I had in the lesson plan here. Again, these other two are just, this is using sprite sheets as flipbooks to create animated materials. This is completely independent of the Niagara particle system. This is just an animated material. And then I also have how we can get Houdini particles into Niagara. And this is actually one of my videos. All right, so I think that's everything. So I'm going to stop the video there, and I will see everybody this afternoon at 1 o'clock.